Hey friends, Spehar here, the host of Under the Desk News on TikTok, taking often complicated or politicized issues and breaking them down into easy to understand truths. Today's webinar is brought to you by the Vitameter, a real-time nutrition optimization platform for health practitioners and their patients. The platform consists of a patient-facing mobile application, Vitameter, that is then paired with the practitioner portal, Vitameter Pro, together to better influence patient outcomes. And we've got one of my friends and colleagues, Corinne Kohlen, back in the studio today to talk about kidney health. Kidney disease is something that often goes undetected until it is very advanced. And unfortunately, this is when somebody may need dialysis or a transplant. The key to finding kidney disease before the trouble starts is regular testing and minding a kidney supportive diet. And that's what we're going to talk about today. The best foods and micronutrients that can fuel a happy, healthy kidney, and some pro tips for feeding and eating your best and feeling and eating your best into the spring. So, Corinne, registered dietitian, director of the program in Dietetics, and lecturer at Cal Poly with a research focus in nutrition, in aging and longevity, renal nutrition, obesity, and diabetes prevention and treatment. Corinne, kidney health is not something that we wake up thinking about, right? It's not like a top of mind issue for folks. So maybe start me at the beginning. Who is at the most risk for kidney disease?
Yeah, so kidney disease is a lot more common than we think. And a lot of kidney disease goes undiagnosed, which is a major problem. The people who are at highest risk are people who have diabetes or high blood pressure, or who have had a family history of kidney disease, older people who are at higher risk, and there's certain races and ethnicities at higher risk, as well as people in lower socioeconomic status brackets are at higher risk, probably mostly due to health disparities, but yeah, lots of people are at risk.
And it's one of those that is really influenced by diet as well, as you were mentioning, right? It's something that what you eat can really impact your likelihood of getting kidney disease.
Well, absolutely, especially with diabetes and high blood pressure being the number one and number two risk factors. Both of those conditions are extremely diet related. You know, having a healthy diet can help you keep those conditions under control and prevent the chances that you progress to kidney disease. If your diet is less healthy, a little more wild, those conditions are going to be uncontrolled and your progression to kidney disease is almost inevitable.
And, you know, one of the things when we say healthy diet, right, like I'm thinking of when I first started looking up healthy diets, it was so focused on protein. And it really became like a big trend over the last couple of years everywhere, right? Like there's junk foods that will print the grams of protein on the side of a bag of Doritos, or there's a big trend in fitness TikTok right now about like dry scooping protein powder, like keto, paleo, all this kind of stuff. But over intake of protein can be dangerous to kidney health. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the kidneys are our main filtering units. And one of the things they do is help process and break down the protein and then get rid of nitrogenous or nitrogen-based waste, things like urea or blood urea nitrogen. The higher protein intakes we eat, in theory, kind of the harder the kidneys have to work. And the research has been a little bit mixed. But generally, the consensus is that high protein diets do harm the kidneys. And most people in the United States are eating an excessive amount of protein. The recommendations are 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. Most people are eating 1.2 to 1.4 grams per kilo, and that would be considered a high protein diet. High protein diets can be pro-inflammatory. They can damage the glomerulus, which is a small little part of the kidney, and they may cause kidney fibrosis. The recommendations for protein intakes for people who have early stages of kidney disease are 0.5 to 0.6 grams per kilo. So that's like 50% of the amount that the average person in the United States is eating. So we should not follow a low or a high protein diet if we want to keep our kidneys healthy.
Right. So now I'm thinking back to all of the peanut butter banana smoothies that I've made pre-workout. That's probably not exactly where we should be going with this kind of stitch, right?
No, the high protein diets may have some benefits for weight loss, which I think is why they've become popular. But if you look at longevity, populations that live the longest actually follow very low protein diets.
Can you talk just a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so there are, like I said, protein can be pro-inflammatory, it can damage the kidneys. Protein can cause our blood to move into a more acidic level, shifting us into something called metabolic acidosis, which long-term can cause damage. And then, depending on which types of protein people eat, I think that plays an important role as well. There's also a specific amino acid called methionine that is associated with shorter lifespans.
Wow, so interesting. And then, so in terms of kidney disease, though, later on in life, like we're trying to regulate how much protein we're having here, being mindful of kidney health, but late stage kidney issues, you may end up needing more protein. It's never like a set it and forget it thing, which is what I hope the folks listening at home take away from this. Can you talk about when that flip happens, or how maybe throughout your life cycle you're looking to do more or less protein?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that that's entirely key to this entire webinar is not every patient is the same and not every diet is the same. If patients end up with kidney failure and end up on dialysis, whether it's hemodialysis or peritoneal dialysis, they actually lose protein during those dialysis treatments. And so we have to put them on higher protein diets, usually between 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram, to help replace some of the protein that they're losing during those treatments.
Mm-hmm. Is there some sort of marker that folks look for to understand when that flip happens?
Well, when they start the treatment, that's kind of when we initiate the diet. At the point that the kidneys have failed, we're no longer really trying to save them with this low protein diet. Instead, we're trying to improve quality of life and reduce morbidity and mortality in the patients that are getting treatment for that end stage kidney disease.
Right, that makes sense. Follow up to that, is there any way to reverse kidney damage with diet, or is it something where once it's damaged, it really doesn't repair?
So in the case of chronic kidney disease, which is the most common type of kidney disease, we cannot reverse it. Diet can very much postpone and slow down the progression of it, though, and give you many more years of healthy life. So you can definitely extend the life of your kidneys, but you can't reverse it once the damage is done.
Mm-hmm. It certainly puts a higher sense of urgency on, working out what a kidney healthy diet is going to be for folks. We had a lot of questions, like you said, the high protein diet became very popular because there were some potential weight loss benefits. What about a plant-based diet? That's also become really popular lately. What are your thoughts on a plant-based diet for kidney health?
Yeah, so most of the research has pointed to the fact that plant-based diets might be really healthy for people with kidney disease. I talked a little bit about metabolic acidosis and high protein levels, increasing acids. Plants kind of do the opposite, and they keep our blood in a really nice neutral pH. They're not pro-inflammatory, they're anti-inflammatory. They have a lot of phytonutrients, which are kind of like magic chemicals in plants. They're associated with reduced inflammation. And diets that are plant-based, especially whole food plant-based, meaning not very processed, have been shown to reduce deaths from kidney disease, reduce inflammation, reduce high blood pressure, reduce cardiovascular disease, which is the #1 cause of death in patients with kidney disease, and also help with things like diabetes. So definitely beneficial for plant-based.
That is good to hear, because one thing that I am a garlic person. I love it. Luckily, it's on the yay list for kidney health. But talk to me a little bit more about, so often we're talking about the scientific, more medical clinical side of kidney disease or whatever it is that we're covering in these monthly webinars. But can you talk to me a little bit about how you can use foods like garlic or pineapple, radish, mushrooms, nuts, things that are very kidney healthy to flavor other foods instead of leaning on salt? Because when you get the kidney diagnosis, the loss of salt can be a real gut punch. but it doesn't have to
Yeah,
be.
for most people who are diagnosed with kidney disease, one of the first recommendations will be to cut back on salt. For lots of
Right.
people, salt increases blood pressure, fluid retention, and so cutting back is a good idea. But use all those things: garlic, onion, pineapple, make pineapple salsa, use it to tenderize meats. Mushrooms have that natural umami flavor. And you can cut up mushrooms and they really go a long way. Nuts are a little higher in phosphorus and potassium, which is sometimes a concern, but still a small amount of them can add a lot of flavor, especially if they're unsalted nuts. Radish is really deep in flavor, kind of looking for those salt alternatives. Cumin, pepper, paprika, anything like that, cilantro, lime, lemon, things to flavor your foods besides salt. I will say, though, that they do sell something called a salt substitute. And often patients with kidney disease, especially in the later stages, need to be careful of those salt substitutes because they can be really high in potassium.
That is an excellent point to make there. And I love that you said, like, use pineapple to tenderize meats and things like that. That reminds me of how important it is to also be culturally and ethnically respectful of the ways that your patients eat the way that you eat. It doesn't mean that you have to eat just bland foods or you have to just eat these things that aren't within your culture. It means things like potentially even going back to the roots of your culture and cooking foods that are really interestingly done by using natural fruit juices and not all the kind of like chemical substitutes we've come up to flavor food as of lately. Do you have a favorite kidney healthy recipe you want to share with us real quick? Like,
Oh
what's
gosh.
one easy thing someone could do? Like when you said pineapple, I immediately thought, okay, well, you can use that to make like a chicken pineapple taco or something like that. Like there are fun things you can make.
I mean, I like stir fries, and a lot of times when we traditionally think of stir fry, we think of adding a lot of soy sauce or teriyaki sauce. But I think you can make a really good, yummy stir fry with pineapple, with garlic, with onions, with mushrooms, with green beans, with celery, with some carrots, and with some of the kidney-friendly vegetables, with water chestnuts or bamboo shoots or sprouts. And I think those types of dishes can go a long way. I also like curry flavor a lot, and using like turmeric or curcumin that has a lot of anti-inflammatory problems and is kidney friendly as well as far as the seasoning goes.
Yeah, I agree with you on the stir fries. We're making stir fries like almost every day in this house because it's so easy. You just throw the stuff in. It doesn't matter if it's fresh or if it's frozen vegetables. All of it cooking together makes a really nice umami flavor. You're getting a lot of texture from the vegetables. I like to use a little bit of like crunchy garlic or something to add the crunch that you might not have gotten if you were using more like salts and whatnot. But it also creates like a nice liquid to it, a good broth for a lot of these foods, which can also be really healing, especially as we're coming out of winter. I mean, some of y'all are in California. I'm out here in New York, still freezing, but those kind of things really make a difference for how we move our body and how we feel motivated.
Yeah. And rice and cauliflower are both kidney friendly foods. So if you were to make a stir fry, you could put it over rice. You could make cauliflower rice if you're trying to watch your carbs. I think there's just a lot of versatility when you make something like that.
Yeah, and this is one of the things like with my doctors and with the folks that I work with, I'm always asking them, okay, well, what did you cook this week? And they're like, well, what did I cook this week? And I know that they're doing a good job, but sometimes it's hard to get that information back. So I think this is a good spot to remind folks what Vitameter is. It is a real-time nutrition optimization platform for health practitioners and for their patients. Really closes the gap on that conversation. And I know we've got some health pros on here and some patients. So depending on which side of the spectrum you're on, it's a good tool for communication between the two. The platform consists of a patient-facing mobile application, the Vitameter, that's then paired with a practitioner tool, the Vitameter Pro. They work together to better influence the patient outcome. In the Vitameter app, patients are able to just enter their daily food log as you're going through it. We've made it super easy. And you can review the micronutrient intake and learn how to close those nutrition gaps through recommended foods. And then on the other side, you've got the Vitameter Pro. So your practitioner has access to all of the recipes, all the things that you ate. They can see the meals that you've logged. They can see the nutrient intake, and they can very easily get a big picture look at what type of meals that you're eating. Is it too phosphorus heavy? Is it too salt heavy? Is it not salt heavy enough in some cases? And send messages directly between the two to communicate. Vitameter takes away that administrative burden of manually calculating the nutrient intake and gives the practitioner the ability to serve more patients and better influence patient outcomes. So if you're interested in being part of the initial rollout, you can visit vitameter.pro, and we will have more info with you, for you later on in this webinar, but it's something that me and Corinne have worked on and we're like super excited about. So hopefully you guys check it out. Back to talking about the kidney and what we can do outside of just better communicating with our doctors. Are there any books or websites that you would recommend for folks researching kidney healthy foods right now?
Yeah. So one of the things that I would have as kind of my baseline, if you're looking for like a kidney cookbook or kidney healthy foods, you want a recipe that's published with nutrition facts on it. And specifically, you want to look for things like phosphorus and potassium, protein, sodium, and probably calories and fat, but definitely those ones, because every patient is so different that you could get a cookbook that says kidney cookbook on it, and maybe only half of those recipes would really work for your particular case. So I would look for one that has those nutrition labels on it, but the National Kidney Foundation has good recipes, American Kidney Fund. There are some dialysis companies. I used to work with one, disclaimer, but DaVita.com has tons of recipes. They do have free cookbooks if you enter your email. Fresenius, I have not worked for, but they also have tons of recipes published and free cookbooks. National Institutes of Health has the Institute of Diabetes, Digestive and Kidney Disease. Those are just a few places that you could look for resources.
Yeah, like we say in the news, trust but verify. Like it may say this is a kidney healthy recipe and it may look really great, but it might be something that somebody has just used things that they found on a list of kidney healthy foods. But in the end, the nutrition facts don't add up to actually be accomplishing the goals that you have. So definitely such great advice, making sure that the recipes you're getting have those nutrition facts so you can share that information with your doctors and you can know it for yourself. Because sometimes just using kidney healthy ingredients does not a kidney healthy meal make, as we found out. Shifting focus just to the elderly for a quick second, what are some of the tips you have for a family who's maybe their parent is now experiencing early kidney failure and they find themselves in the place of caretaker, but they're not a medical professional, they're not sure what to do? Is there anything they can be thinking about? Is there anything diet-wise they could be doing to help their parent?
So I think it depends on how that elderly person got to the kidney disease. If they just got there kind of because of old age alone, then following a normal healthy diet, maybe something like a Mediterranean diet or a whole foods plant-based diet would be good. If they got there because they had diabetes or pre-diabetes or high blood pressure, really keeping that diabetes or pre-diabetes in check or high blood pressure in check, keeping those levels as normal and as possible is going to keep that older adult's kidney as healthy as possible. And you can live years and years and years in stage 3 kidney disease or stage 4 kidney disease. I mean, even stage 5 kidney disease, but you can really, really stretch those stages if you're eating healthy and keeping kind of other conditions at bay.
Mm-hmm. And noting that this is potentially later in life, and we had talked earlier about how sometimes you need more protein at the end to just sustain a good life experience. Is this a good time to bring back protein powder or canned protein powder if it's mixed with water, or you're still thinking like maybe don't do protein powders?
So for elderly, it's tricky. The recommended dietary intakes are not higher specifically for elderly patients, but most of the research says that after the age of about 65, probably a little bit more protein is better. So I would probably work that one out one-on-one with the doctor and based on, some lab levels and kind of kidney function tests. But it does seem that a little bit more protein is beneficial for elderly just because of some of the other conditions, such as sarcopenia that they may suffer from, or muscle health or bone health. So, yeah.
While we're on the topic of disease and family caregivers, we just got a very specific but very good question from the audience. I'm just going to read it straight the way that it's written here, which was, my husband only has half of one functioning kidney and his nephrologist put him on high blood pressure medicine, but he must eat a low potassium diet because of the medication. Many of these good for your kidneys foods are also high in potassium. How do you do it?
Yeah, so potassium can be an issue in patients with kidney disease because it can build up. I would look for lists of low potassium foods: apples, berries, cherries, cranberries, grapes, pears, lemon, lime, pineapple, lettuce, celery, corn, summer squash, mushrooms, garlic, those types of things. If you're finding a food that's on the higher potassium side, sometimes boiling it can help. So for example, with sweet potatoes or yams, if you take the skin off and you boil them and then drain the water, it does what's called leaching the potassium. Reading food labels is really important. Now potassium is required to be on the food label. So that was like a major win for patients with kidney disease. And eating whole foods versus processed foods. When I was doing a little more research for this webinar, what I found is that there are actually no specific studies that have been done on potassium intakes and outcomes in patients with kidney disease from KDOQI, but they found that potassium in fruits and vegetables, these whole foods, when we eat that, it actually helps us excrete the potassium better than when we get potassium from processed foods. Another thing to keep in mind is tracking potassium levels. So ask the doctor, well, how much should I have? What is the number in milligrams? Is it 2,000 milligrams of potassium? And you could track that yourself or working with your dietitian. Maybe, of course, we have our app, the Vitameter, but on any nutrient tracking app, that would be helpful. And then last but not least, potassium is also found in many medications. If you're constipated, that can increase your potassium. So eating high fiber foods and adequate water to help reduce constipation can help you naturally get rid of some potassium in your bowel movements.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. It's something I feel like every month that we do one of these, we remember that fiber is so important. And we're like, oh yeah, that's part of the deal too. There's so much to think about, right? Oh, we got another question on diagnostics. So let's just nerd out on this a little bit. So folks, remember, this is just a fun chat between me and Corinne. So what we discussed here is not a replacement for seeking personalized medical care, but we love talking about this stuff and we want to keep taking questions. But as long as you guys promise me, if you're watching at home, that you are going to still take all of your questions to your doctors, we'll keep answering the specific questions. Since kidneys are affected by diabetes and the precursors to multiple myeloma, what are some things to help in this situation? Kidney functions are tested via labs every 24 hours, urine collections every 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, so I have to admit, this question, especially the multiple myeloma part, was a little bit out of what I've seen a lot specific. The diabetes part, absolutely. So again, like keeping those blood sugars as stable as possible is really important. What I did do a little bit of reading on with multiple myeloma is sometimes patients with multiple myeloma have something called hyperuricemia, which is high uric acid levels. And we can get uric acid from different foods that we eat. Some things that contribute to uric acid are fructose. So think about any food that has high fructose corn syrup in it. Alcohol can contribute to that. Certain proteins, especially things like organ meats and red meats, can contribute to that. So I would say kind of watching the uric acid levels, maybe with regards to the multiple myeloma, and then just really keeping the diabetes as under control as possible, and then drinking enough water was what I could find for that specific question.
Yeah. And this is why these are fun to learn a little bit about. I get to chat with my friend Corinne here, but you've got to ask those specific questions to your doctors too. And there is no such thing as a dumb question. Even if you feel like this must be something that you should know, or this is something that you're embarrassed to ask, don't be. It's so important to be honest with your doctor so that you can get really quality feedback and we can know exactly what's happening with you and we're not guessing also. So you know what is another thing I'm wondering about? With regards to kidney stones, which can happen whether you have kidney disease, late stage, early stage or not, right? That's something that happens fairly frequently. What steps can you take to prevent getting more kidney stones aside from just watching your salt intake?
Yeah, so sometimes kidney stones are due to too much salt intake. Another thing that's a really common cause or contributing factor is not enough water, just not being hydrated enough. The National Kidney Foundation recommends 12 glasses of water a day. Also, eating fruits and vegetables can make the urine less acidic. And when it's less acidic, it's less likely to form those crystals that end up becoming the kidney stones. Animal protein can make the urine more acidic. So that's kind of, again, with maybe where the plant proteins come in. If you're overweight or obese, attempts to lose weight can help. And I read the most common types of kidney stones are calcium oxalate stones. So when people hear that, they think, oh, maybe I shouldn't eat that much calcium. But actually, if you don't have enough calcium, you're more likely to get these stones. So having adequate calcium intakes is important. Some people follow diets that are low in oxalate. You can find lists on the internet of low oxalate foods. That might be helpful. But really what I found was kind of the number one thing was trying to drink as much water as possible and help the kidneys flush out these stones before they form.
Yeah. And for anyone who's ever had a kidney stone, you don't want to get them again, and you don't want to get them in the first place. So that's great advice to take, just to even avoid, if you can, that very unfortunate, very painful situation. We have somebody who is going to be donating their kidney. Interesting. I hadn't even really thought that much about that. Very generous folks on here. So they're asking what kind of things can they do to ensure optimal health for a transplant? I'm sure there's some stuff that's just interesting to learn about, like if you're getting ready for one, or if you're somebody who's going to donate a kidney someday. What kind of stuff should you be thinking about?
Yeah. So thank you to those people out there who are considering. There are way too many people waiting for transplants. There's close to like 100,000 people on the wait list. You can be a living donor, which is really wonderful. I think living donors make up about 1/5 of total donors. And so keeping yourself as healthy as possible. Two things, there's a lot of things that could rule you out, but high blood pressure or diabetes, especially uncontrolled, can rule you out for being a donor. Pretty much if you're a donor, they want to make sure that you're still going to live a long and healthy life with just one kidney, which you can, you absolutely can. But you have to make sure you don't have these types of conditions. So if you had high blood pressure, controlling that blood pressure, or if you were overweight, losing weight to help control that blood pressure, keeping blood sugars normal, being kind of as healthy as you can and getting regular checkups. When you go for the exams to become a donor, they're going to do blood tests. They're going to do cancer screenings. They're going to do MRIs. They're going to do colonoscopies if you're that age. And they're also going to check out your mental health. So kind of being happy with your mental health and in a good place that way. But just really, I would just say being active, getting good sleep, having good community and support, eating a healthy diet, and going to your doctor for regular checkups will kind of help you with that.
Such an important point. Also making sure that your mental health is, being treated just like a physical health would be, because all of those things can raise your cortisol, raise your blood pressure, contribute to furthering kidney disease or other chronic illnesses. And sometimes we think, I know I've seen folks go through this, they're working out, they're eating right, they're doing everything that they can, but they haven't focused on mental health. So they're not seeing their bodies change. They're not seeing things settle into place because you're still missing a piece of the equation. It's so core and important, just like it would be any other thing that you're dealing with. If you had a broken arm, you would have to get that arm set. You couldn't just ignore it until it felt okay again. Question on filtration rate. If a kidney is recover from low filtration rate, can a kidney become more robust if it has experienced low filtration rate, or is it just kind of,
so
like you said, once your kidneys are broken, they're kind of broken?
If it were acute kidney injury, which maybe would happen from a trauma or a really bad infection, or a drug overdose or something, yes, possibly. But in the case of chronic kidney disease, unfortunately, usually that filtration rate, the GFR, it does not generally get better. And so that's why keeping the rest of the body as healthy as you can and keeping that kidney as healthy as you can is so important. I think it is very scary, but I think it can also be very hopeful, because even if you're diagnosed with stage 3 or 4, you could stay in that 3 or 4 for 10, 15, 20 years, potentially, if you really optimize your health. You know what I mean? So you don't necessarily have to progress so quickly and have have to end up in dialysis, but we don't know yet how to reverse chronic kidney disease.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they came out with an HIV vaccine recently, so I feel like we're on our way to all kinds of new health advances, and folks are obviously so interested in these things, interested in public health and how renal health affects public health also, and how this just like keeps communities together and raises the overall population health the more that we can fight these things early. We have a question on optimizing calorie and protein intake for a malnourished patient on dialysis. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, so malnutrition is really common on dialysis, and getting enough calories can be hard. I kind of would look, I mean, I'd have to look at their labs, but optimizing the kidney friendly foods as much as possible, healthy fats, olive oils, healthy proteins like fish if they can. If they have phosphorus and potassium in the range that you could add things like nut butters for extra calories, I would do that. When they're drinking beverages, I know usually their fluid is limited to a certain amount on dialysis, but I would make sure that those beverages are high calorie beverages, at the very minimum juices, but maybe something that's fortified with protein too, like a protein drink or a smoothie. Making easy to eat foods can sometimes help. Things that maybe they don't have to chew too much or prepare too much can sometimes help. Looking for those high calorie items. Sometimes with dialysis, especially, the high calorie items are not always the most nutritious items. So sometimes I will add processed foods in here. I will say you can have some candies, you can put cream cheese on your bagels, you can add butter to stuff, things that we wouldn't always say, but I would say kind of making every bite the highest calorie bite possible, by optimizing like fruit, foods and beverages. If they can have potassium, do things like avocado, that's really high in calorie. That kind of thing maybe can help.
That makes sense. Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the healthy things that we can do. And in our Heart Month, we talked about the effects of red wine. So I'm going to ask the question here too, because it always comes up. Can you talk a little bit about how alcohol impacts kidney health specifically?
So alcohol, especially in higher amounts, which is a lot, more than 2 drinks a day, is bad for the kidneys. If you're consuming more than 2 drinks a day, it doubles your chance at kidney disease. If you're a smoker, in addition to a drinker, you have 5 times the risk of kidney disease. Alcohol can be harmful for the kidneys because it can raise blood pressure, and high blood pressure is bad for the kidneys. It can also raise this thing called uric acid, which I mentioned already, which is harmful for the kidneys. And in many people, if they're chronic alcoholics, their liver can be complicated as well. And if they have any sort of liver disease, it kind of makes the kidney pick up the extra work and the kidney work harder. So a little bit might be okay, but a lot amount chronically is definitely harmful for the kidneys. And I would talk to your doctor about what's safe for you.
Right, and that's why we talk about selective advertising. People who published that red wine was good for your heart didn't back it all the way out too, but it could affect your kidney and it'll definitely affect your liver. And this whole system, sometimes, you got to really keep it in balance and understand your own body and how this is going to particularly work for you. Now, even things like Advil, painkillers, stuff that is affecting other chronic illnesses that you may be experiencing can hurt your kidneys. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Advil is in a drug class called NSAIDs, or like non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. They're really, really commonly prescribed, especially among elderly people. And that's probably the population that they can hurt the most. But those are harmful for your kidneys. They reduce blood flow to your kidneys, and high use has been associated with kidney damage. Tylenol, which is acetaminophen, seems to be the best painkiller for people with kidney disease, and aspirin is kind of maybe next best. But of course, talk to your doctor about any painkiller.
Right.
But yeah, long-term use of things like Advil or ibuprofen can actually really damage the kidneys, and a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, it's these things we think, we've come to take them so casually. You could just buy them over the counter. They're very inexpensive. I've got a headache. I've got an ache, or I think I have some inflammation here. I have whatever. instead of consulting with a doctor or professional, we oftentimes self-diagnose, we take care of it at home, and then, you could be really doing some great damage to yourself with the Advil or painkillers. And of course, when it comes to the patient-doctor relationship, if you're not telling them, hey, I just kind of casually take an allergy pill every morning and a couple Advil because I didn't sleep good, or I have chronic back pain, that can really affect the treatment plan if they don't know about that kind of stuff. This sort of like casual over-the-counter situation that we're so prone to here, and I know we deal with a lot with heart health also because of how much aspirin Americans have been kind of trained to take and how that affects heart health overall. We talked about how smoking is detrimental to your health, of course. We know that. That's a fact everybody can accept. What about some of the workarounds people have tried, like chewing tobacco or vaping? Does that affect kidney health in the same way? It's all kind of the same or no?
Yeah, I was just typing that, and I'm not sure about chewing tobacco. I'm not sure. I would guess it has some of the same pro-inflammatory compounds in cigarettes, but I'm not 100% sure about that one. So I know it's really highly associated with oral cancers and things like that, but I'm not totally sure about kidney health. Oh, I will say tobacco is high in potassium. So for people who are on dialysis or have end-stage kidney disease, that's something to consider.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I'm just now kind of like thinking, and we'll think for the rest of the day about how chewing tobacco may affect your gut biome as well, and how that could potentially be connected to high blood pressure or other issues. So probably not. Probably we shouldn't. Probably not, but we will find out the exact answer for y'all on that, because that's such a great question. It's something that, especially regionally, I'm sure different dietitians and whatnot are facing those kind of questions more frequently. Last question from the audience, grain products that are low in phosphorus but high in fiber, any come to mind right off?
Yeah, so these are not the most popularly cooked grains, but things like barley, buckwheat, bulgur, wild rice. Popcorn is actually considered a low phosphorus food. I don't know if you would exactly consider it a grain. The thing with phosphorus that comes from whole grain products, though, is what I've read is when you get phosphorus that's in a whole grain food like that, a lot of the fiber in the food and other plant compounds in the food bind to that phosphorus so that not as much is absorbed in your body. So even if you're eating whole grains that have a higher phosphorus content, like quinoa or brown rice or something maybe more common, you're not going to absorb as much of that phosphorus because it's bound up within the compound of that grain. And you'll absorb way less than if you were eating like a processed food. So we think that the whole grains are still beneficial to incorporate for their benefits on like digestive health and that sort of thing, even though they're a little bit higher in phosphorus.
Right, makes sense. But trying to figure out how to use those barleys and those less popular grains would definitely, I mean, they're doing it all now. Who would have thought kale would be such a big thing, right? Like it used to be a plate garnish and now it's like the center of everything. So I know we will find it out. Anything else that you want to kind of like throw out as our last moments here that people can be doing for kidney health outside of what we've talked about?
Oh gosh. I mean, I would just say to stay positive if you have kidney disease or somebody that has kidney disease. It does seem like a really daunting diagnosis, and especially the diet, but you can really get creative with the diet and find ways to make it work for you. And also you will change over time, labs ebb and flow. I've had patients who sometimes I have to really restrict their potassium and then other months not, so things can change and get different. You can probably avoid end-stage kidney disease if you work on other aspects of your health and, maintain a long and kind of happy life with the status quo of whatever your diagnosis is. Work with your doctor, work with your dietitian for sure. There are dietitians that specialize in kidney disease. Often your doctor can refer you to one. And I guess one more important thing I would say is if you're seeing a primary doctor, make sure to ask them how your kidneys are doing, because a lot of doctors won't mention anything to you until your GFR is less than 60, at which point you already have stage 3 kidney disease. So be proactive in asking your doctor.
Yeah, such a great point, because when you get this diagnosis, you oftentimes feel so alone. But 33% of adults in the United States are at risk for kidney disease. That's 1 in 3 people at risk for kidney disease. And like you said, it's not something that they screen for necessarily straight off. We're thinking, they're typically like heart, weight, all that kind of stuff they hit for. But asking them, I really want to stay on top of kidney health. I want you to test for it. I want to know what my marker is now, so I can start to kind of like science back math my way to how I want to, show up in the world for the next couple years. Very, very important. Also important because your kidneys activate vitamin D, which is a defective kidney can lead to heart disease, weak bones, even nerve damage. So this is something that, while we don't think about it that much because hasn't been as popular in pop culture and all different kind of things, it's really at the center of a lot of what we could be thinking foundationally when we're building a healthy life for ourselves. Corinne, I want to thank you for being here. It is always such a pleasure, and I have such fun. These 45-minute webinars fly by each month. What I heard from you is that high-protein diets can damage the kidney. It's beneficial for weight loss, which is why they got pretty popular, but populations with longevity have low-protein diets in common. Protein can be pro-inflammatory, lead to more acidic blood. A diet can postpone the progression of kidney disease, but we can't reverse it. And plant-based may be good for kidney disease and help keep the blood at a neutral pH and be anti-inflammatory on its own. So again, plant-based for the win. We are so excited that y'all joined us today. And once again, I'm Spehar, the host of Under the Desk News on TikTok and Instagram. Corinne, we're going to send out all the information on where you can find her, sign up with her, talk to her, follow her journey. And of course, we want to thank Vitameter. Remember to visit vitameter.pro for more information on how this platform can help optimize your patient outcomes, but also how you can lean on it just as a person who wants to better track the foods that you're eating. And like we said, it's so important, the nutritional makeup of the foods that you're eating, because sometimes just picking healthy foods, if you put them in the wrong order, one can cancel the other one out, or it can end up not doing what you were hoping that it was going to do. So we'll send out a recording of today's chat with the recap, as well as where to find Corinne and I. And again, thank you so much to Vitameter for having us today. I hope that we'll see you all again next month for the next one.